Good evening. This first day of March 2018. Now, tens of environmentalists gathered at Uhuru Park today to protest the passage of the standard gauge railway through the Nairobi National Park. At least 100 acres of the Nairobi National Park and 40 acres of the Ololua Forest will be hived off for construction of Phase 2A of the standard gauge railway. Away from that, the ravaging drought that has hit the country has seen cases of human-wildlife conflict in the area as wild animals wander beyond the park's borders in search of water. Now, what is the solution to conserving and protecting our wildlife? That will be our discussion tonight on News Compass. My name is Zainab Ismail. Remember to join in the conversation on our SMS platform. 20268 is the number, as well as our Twitter handle at Ebru TV Kenya, the hashtag News Compass. But first, let's listen into this.
We are going to relocate 21 elephants. We have 3 bulls and then a family of elephants. So we're going to relocate them to the northern side of Tsavo, that is southern of Kitui.
And you may ask why. We have lived very well with wildlife around here. But unfortunately, because of the climate change, the animals are now wandering into the farms of individuals. And it is unfortunate because it is us, the human beings, who have invaded. We are hoping that very soon we are going to have the fence around Mount Kenya. On the Aberdare side, we have a fence.
Lakini sisi tunasema tuko na shida za kutosha na ndovu.
Kwanza ukiweka mathematically, sio kuchochea. Soma katiba. Inasema ukihatarishwa maisha yako, uko na haki ya kumua yule mnyama.
All right, welcome to the program. Allow me to introduce my guests on the panel this evening. Jim Nyamu, Executive Director for Elephants Neighbors Center, as well as in the middle, Stanley Prince, a lawyer who will be able to tackle the legal aspect of the entire conservation of wildlife. And on my far right, of course, Steve Itela, Director of Operations at African Network for Animal Welfare. Very warm welcome, gentlemen, to the program this evening.
Thank you for having us.
All right, we've just heard about what is happening in terms of translocating some elephants. Now, the Kenya Wildlife Service has embarked on that project of relocating 21 elephants from Nyeri and Laikipia, respectively, to the Tsavo National Park. And this is what they say is, reducing the human-wildlife conflict that we've seen in some parts of the country. I'd like to ask the question, does this solve that particular issue that we are experiencing? I'll probably start with you, Jim.
Thank you so much for having us here again. And yeah, if you look at the translocation, is a short-term ways or measures of reducing conflict. And I know the first translocation was done in 1995 in this country by KWS, moving elephants from Mwea Reserve to Tsavo. It did not solve much of the problem. I remember even some years back, there were some elephants that were moved from Siampei in Masai Mara to Game Reserve, and all of them came back. And the recent cases, I know there has been a lot of issues from scientists, and personally, I have studied elephants in Mount Kenya, Laikipia, Aberdares, and it is one of the best or healthy ecosystem. If you compare where we took the elephants to Tsavo, to me, it was not a good idea. And where those elephants were in Sagare Sorio Ranch, those were areas, their habitats, as Mheshimiwa Kanini Kega put it. And the reason why KWS would think about translocating these, I know there is a lot of complaint from communities and even members of parliament. You saw even members of parliament, Mheshimiwa Mwadime, down in Tsavo, saying we don't want these elephants.
Exactly.
Because already what they have is too much, about 11,000 elephants, and there is problem in mitigating conflict. So, and moving one elephant, how much it is, and 21 elephants, to me, that money that was spent in translocating those elephants, I think can be utilize something better than that. But the minister is in, and you saw what he said his commitment is to reduce human-wildlife conflict. And in his views, because they say most of them were bulls, because there is a notion that bulls cause a lot of more damage than the family group. To me, it has been done. You know, we cannot do so much, but I think it is not something that we can encourage. We saw in Kajiado removing 26 elephants from Kajiado, and they were taken to I think they were taken to Tsavo. And of course, even they are taken to Tsavo, the ecosystem is the same because they will still walk, and elephants have memory, they will never forget, and they can still walk back to the same place because there is a reason and purpose why they spend a lot of time within that specific area.
So what you're saying is this isn't a holistic solution to curbing this, human-wildlife conflict that we're seeing, Jim?
There could be a better way of, as I like Mheshimiwa Kanini, the way he said, it is as a human being that I have caused these. And if we think that translocating elephants would be the best solution, I've seen even some have been taken from Laikipia to Meru, and they have walked back in Laikipia. And it is a short term.
Right.
I think the best way is to look at why are elephants doing this conflict, and what is the conflict? You know, I like the way somebody asked, can we define conflict?
Right.
Conflict is when animals are looking for water, pasture, and where else can they look from these for these things? They can only look for pastoralists or for communities who have these. I think, to me, we need to identify a better way of coexistence, and human being, we must be saved. You know, we must change our attitude, being so humane and share resources with wildlife. Even as much as there is all these problems, we have to, if we want to end conflict sustainably, we have to allow and give them space and share what we have.
All right. Steve, I'd like to get your opinion in regards to the same.
First of all, I want to sympathize with communities that live next to elephants because the conflict they face is real and it poses a challenge to those communities. You can imagine a farmer working so hard to grow something on his small piece of land and an elephant just walks overnight and everything is gone. To me, that's a matter of concern. And so, having said that, we are also experiencing challenges like Jim has put, where humans have actually encroached into wildlife habitats.
Yes.
And whether we talk about elephants in the country increasing, I would also talk about the range of elephants also decreasing. So as they decrease, they are now exposed, and that heightens the conflict that you are seeing. So all the facts of translocating elephants and all the facts of communities saying they need to be moved, all of them are justified. However, the translocation need to be looked at it in terms of solving a problem. And I do agree, translocation is not a long-lasting solution, but it's a temporary one. If you moved elephants to an area that is very close to the area where the conflict is, they will come back. So I think in this particular case, Tsavo and Mount Kenya is determined by the distance that they will not come back.
All right.
And if you look at the bulls and the families, the bulls tend to be solitary and don't walk in families, and quite often they are they form what we call the problem elephant in the area. So what needs to be done?
Exactly.
I think what needs to be done is population is growing and the habitat for the elephant is narrowing. I think we need a robust conversation where we talk about the long-term effects and the long-term solution. Now, here are two things that I'm asking. Are we transferring a problem from Mount Kenya to Tsavo? I do not know. Maybe there is an opportunity that the elephants, the bulls actually that are being moved from Mount Kenya to Tsavo may survive, but I'm not sure. The next one is, are there also communities in Tsavo? Yes, they are. What will happen to the conflict? I'm only hoping that this particular translocation is actually guided by that science, that you're not moving a problem from one region to the other region. But all the same, Kenyans, we need to dialogue.
All right. Prince, to take a look at what has been said here is the fact that humans are also, encroaching into the wildlife habitat. So in a legal perspective, do we need to put legal structures to ensure that this is curbed, and this is, probably gives one of the solution to curbing the human-wildlife conflict that we're experiencing?
Thank you very much. I think the legal infrastructure does exist, and what we need from my perspective and from my viewpoint, is a greater enhancement or a greater understanding of the severity of the condition. When we talk about this, I saw a picture on social media the other day of Karura Forest, and there's the forest is disappearing from the center. So you could be outside the forest and you're seeing a forest area, but from inside, the logging is happening at an extreme rate. We talk about the landmass and the ratio of forest to human settlement. The acceptable rate is 24% minimum globally, but Kenya is at 8%. That is, we are doing 300% worse than we need to be doing. So, and as my colleagues have said, the greatest problem is human population increase. And if I can reiterate his words, we need to have a discussion around what are we going to do about this. This will require innovations such as expansion of settlements upwards. We encourage more skyscrapers as opposed to building land across. A second aspect, and this is a more legal issue, is what is our leadership talking about? When you have this kind of conflicts happening, what is the populist way of dealing with it? Most of the times you'd find that where somebody has been found to have encroached on the forest because they have a political backing, they're able to get away with it. But we need to be stricter. And fortunately, the new CS for environment is none other than the former Director for Prosecution, Tobiko. So I would expect that he would bring that kind of legal versatility to the job, and he should tackle very seriously any people who are found to offend. I have a picture on my phone that I've never been able to share of a KWS pickup carrying charcoal. I mean, that I thought about it, and as I took the picture, the lady was like, don't take that picture, for obvious reasons. I can only imagine where that charcoal came from, and it's been transported on a KWS pickup on an open road. It tells you about the irony and the lack of respect for law, and that is why we are suffering now in terms of lack of water, because we've decimated the water, and that has now, apart from influencing the human beings, also animals. They have to travel a long distance to go and look for water, and hence we have the human-wildlife conflict escalating.
All right, Prince. Jim, Prince has talked about the fact that we already have, legal structures in place, maybe not so well in terms of implementation. Isn't it time now we take a look at the community and bring them on board, rather, to ensure that they are the ones that are able to, take care of the wildlife, because they're the ones who interact with the wildlife?
Yeah, when we talk about the policy, I was listening yesterday to Mheshimiwa Boni Haruare, and I got some points from him. I've never thought about this. If you look at the policy makers we have, and I'm talking of some of the members of parliament who we have now, some of them, I like the way he said, were musicians, were even some who are actually doing, they are artists. They're just laymen people. And those are people who are implementing policies. I want to say what has taken over this country backwards is the attitude. And this attitude, in as much as we have a good law, remember, we have a 2005 Forest Act, which allows, and it was borrowed from Nepal by late Wangari Maathai. It was one of the best policy to bring community close to the forest so that they can help and own the forest management. What has happened over time now, much of the destructions, the one that the lawyer is saying here, has been done by the user groups, because the CFA has to come up with a user group of which we understand that logging was illegal. So what I'm saying is, yes, we might expect so much from the communities, but we need to guide them. Like this issue of human-wildlife conflict. To me, not that we are so many to manage to maintain the wildlife in this country, but the thing is, we must agree that wildlife is a land use. Like where we are taking away these animals in Sagare, those areas are not arable at all. But communities can begin generating income through the wildlife. Because people don't see like wildlife can generate resources, can generate revenue. So policies are okay. Like now we have the new Wildlife Act. But this new Wildlife Act, has it trickled down, cascaded down to communities? Do our communities know what they need to do? In fact, the implementers, which is KWS, do not even have the capacity, because we talk about some of these areas where we have this problem are areas where it is outside the park. And so we left it to who? To the chiefs. Do chiefs understand conservation? They think wildlife belongs to KWS. And then, in as much as we would depend on community to do all these things, they need technical advice. So policy may work, yes, but it need. And I am very happy, like what the CS Tourism and Wildlife today, he said, that we need to respect the organizations that are geared or mandated to do wildlife. Because it is only them who can identify other technical support. ANO can support them, Elephant Neighbor Center can support, other institutions can support. But if we left community, as Steve said, most of communities, they see wildlife as pest. They see wildlife as something that is not helping them. And that's why you see that has even gone to the parliament, and it has gone even to, we've seen some governors saying remove these animals belongs to KWS from our own area. Why? Because they have never owned this problem. If you have a problem with a bull in your boma that is fighting all those other cows, do you kill? You separate that from these other cows. If you have a dog that is so tough, you separate that, you manage this. And I think this is what we need to do. The country needed to understand, when we lose the wildlife, the next thing we will lose human being. And we will have lost the environment.
Steve, I'd like to get your comments on the ownership narrative. Communities, we've seen quite a number of initiatives to educate the communities in terms of conserving the wildlife. Maybe that has helped a little bit, but how much is needed in terms of the communities understanding the fact that wildlife does not belong to KWS, wildlife does not belong to the government, but indeed belongs to us?
Thank you so much. The issue of community engagement is a historical issue where initially communities used to coexist with wildlife. Then the colonial regime separated communities from wildlife management. They put them aside. And in the process, only a few individuals benefited. But I can tell you the landscape has changed now. That's very different. Communities right now are at the forefront. In fact, when we talk about 8% of wildlife area in Kenya under protected areas, communities are actually creating an effort and will soon double that figure to almost about 22%, which actually will meet the Aichi targets of about 25% globally. So as far as communities' role in wildlife conservation is concerned, I would be very, very unreal to say that communities are not aware, particularly the ones that have coexisted with wildlife. They are aware and they know. Where the disconnect and the problem is where the government is not paying attention to some of the damages that wildlife causes to the communities. I think that's where the disconnect is.
And maybe one of those issues as well is compensation.
That's true. Exactly, and that's where I was going to come from. We talked about the legal framework. The legal framework now recognizes community engagement in wildlife conservation. And that's why we've got the Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association that's now bringing communities, it's bringing private landowners, and anybody interested in wildlife conservation outside protected area. And that movement is actually creating more space for wildlife. In Kenya, we can say, in fact, more space has been created for wildlife. But in the same act, we have this compensation thing that was so amorphous, created by members of parliament, either to appease their voters, that they are actually handling compensation. Then they forget one critical element. Allocate a budget for that compensation to be given out to the communities.
Exactly.
The moment parliament failed to do that, let me tell you something, conflict went out of control completely. And so the communities have this narrative. If I kill an elephant, 2-3 choppers would come landing there instantly. But if an elephant kills a community member, nothing.
Nothing will happen.
Are you getting it? That's
Yes.
where the problem is. So the legal structures are there. Community engagement is there. The elephant in the room is how you want to share the benefits that are generated from wildlife conservation. At the moment, most of, I think 80% of the revenue is going to the tourism sector, and that money does not even come to the country. It is actually stashed out there. So the sector is so choked
Right.
that it cannot even sustain the mandate that it has as per the Wildlife Act.
All right. Prince, now you come in here and tell us there's this disconnect in terms of, compensation to the community when there's a, interaction between wildlife and human beings, and there is, distraction in the process. What will ensure the implementation of these, policies that we have, strategies that are there, the acts that are already there in the Constitution? What way forward?
We have, under the Wildlife Management and Conservation Act, we have the county compensation committees, which are supposed to ensure that there is community integration when we're talking about the compensation for persons who have either been killed as a result of human-wildlife conflict and property that has been destroyed by animals. But I think there will be need to ensure that it is more community integrated. Perhaps we may need to reconsider the composition of these committees to ensure that there is more of the community than there is of the government, because as it is chaired by an appointee of the cabinet secretary, and you have officers from agriculture, you have officers from wildlife, from tourism, and so on and so forth. And also from the local county government, but who really speaks on behalf of the community? That becomes an issue. So again, we have taken government and we've taken a high-handed approach, and it's not working properly. But as my colleague has already spoken about, the structures may be there, but once we fail to budget for them, it creates about a ripple effect. Because if today a lion attacks my sheep, I'm a farmer, I do not get compensated despite the law saying I should be compensated. What will be the next step is to go and kill another lion. And then now the lions come back again, and and so on and so forth. Because what we forget is that these animals are social creatures. Human beings are not the only social creatures. The elephants, they have feelings. So we have encroached on their space. We have decimated the land mass, the forest land mass. They have nowhere to go. So at times, yes, because of aggression and because of all those things, the elephants would stray from the protected areas and they would end up in human settlements. But instead of us finding a way to amicably resolve this conflict by compensating the first aggrieved party, once you don't have compensation, then you have a reoccurrence, because now you have politicians inciting members of the community to go and conduct revenge attacks.
All right.
So it's important that the legal structure which is there is supported in the budget.
Right.
Let us have the county compensation committees well funded. Let us have KWS, and I was sharing with my brother Nyama, and he told me that earlier KWS had funding. They would even go, if somebody has been killed by wildlife, or if somebody's livestock or plants have been destroyed, even before the process has formally begun, the local KWS officers would go and would give a token of condolence or consolation. And it really brought the community together with the KWS, and it becomes one team.
Right.
You're all playing on the same side. You all want the best for the humans. You all want the best for the wildlife. But once you have a disconnect and you put KWS in an awkward position, they appear to be just protecting the wildlife and not caring about animals. It disadvantages everybody.
Yeah, definitely. But there is a big...
In
yes.
addition to that, I just wanted to talk about devolution.
All right.
And that's another area that we've not focused. While the mandate of wildlife conservation is still at the national level, there's a certain level of devolution that has been brought down to the county level. Now, the county wildlife compensation committees are the ones that are supposed to manage that devolution, the devolved function of the national government, right to the county level. There's a complete disconnect. Who funds the county wildlife compensation committees? That's the lacuna in the Wildlife Act. Counties have not recognized the existence of those committees, yet they have a larger function that brings management of wildlife resource at the county level up to national. To date, we're still having fights between the national government and the county government. We need to resolve that. We need to address the issue of funding.
All right.
Who is going to fund the national government, and how is the national government going to give county government support also financially in order for them to support the work of the county wildlife compensation committees. Remember, they are the ones, when there is a conflict, they assess the extent of the conflict. And they are the ones who fill the forms for compensation claims, then they hand them over to the ministry. Poor ministries, they are blamed. They don't have a budget. So we've got all these compensations claims accumulating that even when Treasury releases a certain amount, it can't even meet 50% of the compensation claims that are there.
So
and that's where the real
there's
challenge
a
is.
huge gap there between,
yes.
there's actually a disconnect between the national government in terms of funding and to the committees responsible at the county level. And of course, there's also a bigger problem is the fact that we are experiencing a drought, and this is forcing the animals out of their packs, out of their habitat, into, you know, the human, you know, areas. And of course, we'll be discussing that in just a moment. We'll be taking a very short break here on News Compass as we take a look at issues and the entire state of wildlife in Kenya. Remember, our SMS platform is free of charge. 20268 is the number. Your opinion does count. Stay tuned. We still have so much more lined up for you. All right, and a very warm welcome back to the program. You're watching News Compass as we take a look at the state of wildlife in the country. And of course, we've been taking a look at the human-wildlife conflict that is being experienced in the country. But most importantly to note is the fact that on the 3rd of March, which is on Saturday, we will be celebrating the World Wildlife Day. I don't know how well we have prepared ourselves as a country. Maybe, Jim, you can tell us.
Okay, thank you. I think this is the third time that the Kenya is observing this World Wildlife Day. And to be honest, it is not something that is known in this country. And I've just learned that the Kenya will not be observing that day. There has been some directives from the relevant authority that there will be no, you know, there will be no celebrations, but people can celebrate where they stay. Unfortunately, if you look at the current situation in this country, as we are debating about the human-wildlife conflict, you know, how do you expect somebody whose elephants spend the whole night in his farm to celebrate or to remember World Wildlife Day? So it is something that, to my opinion, it is something that, as Steve says, through the devolution, and in every country today, we have the CEC in charge of the wildlife, environment and tourism. And I think it must begin there. We are not really there to celebrate and to clap our hands and say, yeah. But it is a time to de-evaluate and see what, as a human being, what have we done? Have we created space for this wildlife? How are we taking this wildlife? And I think, as Steve put it, is an opportunity for conservation dialogue. And also look at how can we mitigate, because the conflict of a certain species varies. The monkey conflict is totally different from a buffalo or a giraffe conflict. And each species has a different way of mitigating the conflict. So this is a very important day. We even have other days, like even World Elephant Day, World Rhino Day, but this one is a collective. And I think for Kenya, it's a high time to come and think about how do we remember the World Wildlife Day in terms of taking stock. How many animals do we have? And, or in terms of the species. And statistics shows that the wildlife in this country, from the aggregate species to the big mammals to the birds, have reduced. Even the livestock, we have also seen the livestock, the sheep and the goat and the cattle have reduced. But why have they reduced? So there are many factors that would look at this. And I think each county today, even in Kisii, where we think there are no wildlife, there are animals. People never thought that Murang'a Central, there is animals, there are monkeys. You know?
And what really would inform the decision not to mark this particular day? Because the essence of this day is to create the awareness on the importance of having wildlife, which, by the way, contributes a very huge percentage in the tourism sector of our country.
I am not very sure, because we just got a signal from the directives from, I think, from the ministry, the Keda Breakthrough Ministry, and it was to happen in Kajiado County, which is the, for a couple of months, we've seen the heated debate about the governor saying, Keda Breeze, come and remove this wildlife here. And I think the idea behind the taking the day there, last year we were in Nakuru, and the reason why we were even going there is to try and change or try to bring communities together and understand and show them there are some avenues of livelihoods that we can get from the wildlife, and also look at some of the problems, like even the human-wildlife conflict, setting up the conservancies, how important are, because they are very important in either reducing human-wildlife conflict and also improving on the livelihoods through the dry grass bank, like we are experiencing the drought, but the moment they establish those conservancies, they give that. So it is not very, very clear why there will be no celebration per se, and if there will be no celebration organized by the Keda Base and other stakeholders, who I am afraid they have been sitting down for the last 2 months to plan this event, I think is a big drawback. And we can even celebrate by talking among ourselves. And I saw last year when we went to Nakuru, communities wanted to know how many rhinos do we have in Nakuru, and even actually individuals, businessmen were asking, Keda Breeze, tell us how you would want our support. And I remember vividly that we got a lot of support buying water, buying biscuit for kids. It came from communities themselves who lives in Nakuru. And I think it will not be very good for this day not to be observed. Observing from where we are by sending a tweet will not be enough, but we need to be on the ground. We need to continue talking to people and show them how important a wildlife from a hyena, a wildlife from a tree, wildlife from a butterfly are very important.
Definitely.
Right.
Steve, quite a big blow for, conservationists as well, and this is important for the country. So definitely it is important to also note the fact that that decision probably came, with regards to certain, the decision was informed by something important. But then again, this is a big blow for us as Kenyans.
Yes, it is a big blow, particularly for those who would actually benefit from the information that is actually generated from a national function like the World Wildlife Day. But let me give you a genesis. This is the 3rd year since that day was established. And it is actually the convention that is looking at the international trade on endangered species that actually pushed for this day. Because every time we went on to a CITES meeting, there were 3 critical things we are looking at. We were looking at illegal trade, vis-a-vis legal trade, and then the illegal killing for wildlife parts and products that was contributing to either dissemination or extinction of certain wildlife species. So when we went to that fora, we said, wait a minute, we are here talking about trade issues related with flora and fauna, yet the public out there does not understand the importance of actually conserving our wildlife. And so that's when they went to UN, and UN through its systems, the General Assembly, actually adopted the World Wildlife Day. Now, whose day is it? This is just government saying, we will not show up. It should actually be a Kenyan's day. All right? When I mean about it, it's Kenyans actually coming out to talk about the God-given resource that is close to them and begin to engage and see exactly what are the win-win scenarios that are available to them. Now, the whole purpose of the World Wildlife Day is actually to raise awareness on the plight that animals are actually going through. That's the entire purpose. Now, it's got nothing to do with government. Now, if every civil society, every individual captures that aspiration, just like we celebrate Madaraka Day, Jamhuri Day, and every other public holiday, that is how we need actually to embed the World Wildlife Day into our calendar.
All right.
That is the day where we celebrate the God-given nature around us. Remember the elephants that we are very proud that we are showing on TV right now, they are not in every country of this globe. They are only in selected places. In some places, they are unique and different.
And we should be proud of them.
We should be proud of that. Some countries have tigers. We have lions, leopards, and cheetahs. So we can't complain that we need to bring tigers here. They will never survive. So let's be proud about the lion, the cheetah, and the leopard. And that's the theme for this year's World Wildlife Day.
The big cats.
You're saying the big cats under threat. And that theme is celebrated globally. So if you've got tigers, you celebrate the tiger.
Yes.
If you have a cougar, you celebrate the cougar. In Kenya, we only have 3 of them. And do you know the sad bit of it? They are declining.
Definitely. And we also have only 3 northern white rhinos remaining in the entire world, all at the Olpejeta Conservancy. None capable of breeding. We just got information a few hours ago from the Olpejeta saying the only male northern white rhino in the entire world, which is in Laikipia County, is very frail and his health is declining. So what happens is, despite the fact that scientists are putting in measures to ensure that this subspecies does not go extinct, he is ailing, he is about to die. God forbid that he dies. But if that happens, that subspecies ends like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's gone completely, and you'll never see it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we are blessed as Kenya is actually to be able to try and revive that particular subspecies of the rhino.
All right.
And I know every efforts are being made, and I know God is not also asleep. In his own ways, he will intervene much more better than the human mind and the human capacity.
Yeah.
But he is a big agenda, and that's why I still come back to the World Wildlife Day. It's a Kenyan affair. Can Kenyans grasp that?
All right.
Where else
All right.
would you want to go on a weekend? Where else would you want to take your family? My father blessed me with an opportunity to go to some of these national parks when I was a young person. And that's why I'm still stuck onto conservation, because of that first experience and that encounter. And I'm really urging Kenyans, this is your resource. It's your resource that even a visitor anywhere, as far as the US, China, Japan, and wherever is concerned, he says, I must make it a point to visit Kenya, to go to Masai Mara, to go to Laikipia, to go to Tsavo, to go to Amboseli and see something different from where I come from.
All right.
But are Kenyans planning to go somewhere to see tigers, cougars, and all those? No, they are not. So you have a resource that the entire globe envies. And here we are playing around with it. It doesn't make sense. So let's raise awareness that the big cats are actually under threat.
All right.
What can we do to ensure that the big cats survive and our generation also are able to see them rather than reading them from books?
Yeah. Stanley, now the government has said we'll not be marking this very important day, but then we have organizations, that of Stevie Teller as well as Jim Nyamu. Can they organize, you know, what we say is maybe a World Wildlife Day on their own, and will that bring any legal implications on them saying, you know what, it's fine, so we don't have a World Wildlife Day that is sanctioned by the government, but let's come together to raise the awareness together on a low-scale level?
Thank you. It will be now on a low-scale level because this will be an effort that is being amalgamated by the private organizations. But I think it will, if indeed they have been instructed not to celebrate the day on Saturday, it will be important that the NGOs and the organizations come together and still mark it with or without the government support. But as my brother said, it is unfortunate that our government is playing around with a resource that is world envied all over. Every time we have global celebrities or global icons coming to Kenya, it is because of the wildlife, and that is the bedrock of our tourism. We all saw the pictures of Usain Bolt playing with a cheetah and going as far as adopting Angelina Jolie and all the other global superstars who come to Kenya because of our wildlife and especially the big cats. So I think the responsibility to mark this day should not be passed by the NGOs, even if, unfortunately, they do not have the support of the government. I'd like to challenge my brothers Dr. Nyamu and Steve to continue the good work, and it shall be rewarded. We have a responsibility to our children and to the next generation to leave behind this valuable resource in a better state than we left it. And as we look at the legal framework, I have just one challenge I'd like to pose, that countries like Malaysia on different issues decided and Singapore decided to issue death penalties for things they consider serious offenses like drug trafficking. For how long are we going to watch people getting arrested with ivory and getting slaps on their wrist? I say give them a death sentence. You cannot kill elephants until we're left with like only, elephants, and kill rhinos, and we're left with just one male white rhino, and you get away with a few years in jail. You've cost the entire subspecies from
economic sabotage.
It's economic sabotage. The same way the president was saying people who are messing with the SGR should be hung. I say the same people who are messing with our wildlife, give them the death sentence. We need to get serious about our resources and the legal framework and implement it with a lot of political goodwill from the government all the way from the top to the bottom.
All right. Now, very important issue here again is today environmentalists came together to protest, the passage of the SGR through the Nairobi National Park, and this has been quite an issue in contest for a very long time, but they are willing to do that. So I don't really know what the solution is to this. Jim,
yes,
the SGR will be passing, phase 2A will be passing through part of the Nairobi National Park. This will indeed affect wildlife, although there are research that has been done, and some are saying that no, that will not be able to, we have strategies to ensure that the passage of SGR through the Nairobi National Park does not interfere with the migration as well with the wildlife in that surrounding area. But really, what's way forward in this?
Thank you. The issue of standard gauge railway and Nairobi Park is a thorn in the flesh in many people, and I feel this country, the government have refused to listen to the scientists, and it is the whole thing. Even as we speak, the issue of why we are not told not to. And before I even talk about the SGR, I want to challenge the institutions that were planning for the World Wildlife Day. When I started my campaign, I never had any government support.
Yes.
I started as an individual. In fact, I remember the letter that I got from the government. I was told that I'm doing this at my own risk. We were with Steve. Now they support us. So I think what we need to do is to educate some of those members of parliament, to educate our minister. We need to work together. We need to work together. Our PS is very knowledgeable, respected in wildlife area. She comes from wildlife area, and I think we need to do that. The issue of standard gauge railway is actually the baby of the whole ignorance. And I remember the current KWS chairman, who we regarded with a lot of respect. He inspired many people. I am one of the people that he inspired. And I remember at some point he said that the railway will pass through Nairobi Park over his dead body. Now, why it's now passing in his generation now. And there has been so many people. We have even tried getting Okiya Mtata, our good friend, activist, to support us, because the scientists, the conservationists have not been heard. It is something that you look at most of the conservationists. They are not, we are tired. Have you ever been to a war and you are injured? We've been injured, we've been in the media, we have looked at the support from the international world to come and help us. Even as this thing is happening now, there is a court injunction.
Yes.
People are not involved. And it's the same case. If we will not really be committed with what we say, judiciary must be very strong here. They must come and support all these things. And we were just talking another day with the lawyer here. Even the issue of the license of the NEMA. When the NEMA says this should not be done, it should not be done. The EIA that came, and Steve will talk about this, he's been spearheading this. It gave out so many mitigations. You know, and they brought in the issue of having pillars. They are not touching the ground, but those pillars are not hanging. And remember, Nairobi Park is surrounded with a lot of challenges. Remember, Nairobi Park is it is more than for Kenyan. It is international bioreserve. And some 2 years ago, Kenya celebrated, or Kenya was given a credit by the international world by burning, destroying 105 tons of ivory. I spoke in the House of Lords in the UK, and I saw the commitment of the international world in terms of saving our heritage. But we Kenyans here, are we really concerned? We've already seen the threats that the railway has brought from in Savo area. And when we talk about this, we are talking of one of the effects that the railway will bring, leave alone, among other things, leave alone the noise, is the invasive species. What is invasive species? They are unwanted plants that are actually thorny in the ecosystem or in the biodiversity. What are their threats? They take away much of the very important pasture, and like Nakuru is suffering from that. Savo, where the railway passes. So this is one of the things that, and Nairobi Park is the only park in the world.
In a capital city.
In a capital city. But you see, even if you look at the 2030 vision, there is nowhere wildlife feature. What comes is the tourism, and I'm very happy our new CS here has changed the thematic area from they are talking of their flagship is the beaches. They must bring wildlife. Environment is cut across many things. So this issue of Nairobi Park, it is something that, and I remember personally when it was announced, when I saw Okia Mtata with all those things, for the last 2 days I was not even having good sleep. Because it is like, what else can we now fight for? If for real, the Nairobi Park, the railway has come, our chairman who we and I feel, and I have actually been saying, to be honest, and I'm saying this, to be honest, I think our chairman, Dr. Richard Leakey, actually should retire from conservation. You know, he founded KWS in 1989. He has been there and he supported conservation. He has spoken internationally. But the time he is retiring, this is what he has given us. And I remember what late Wangari Maathai said. If we do not protect the nature, it will reach a time whereby the nature will begin judging us harshly. Look at what is happening now. And the scientists in Nairobi, KWS, the scientists from DSRIS, the scientists who came, all of them said there should be a better option. I remember even UNEP were ready to support by giving out money we go the wrong way. But why Nairobi Park? Nairobi Park is okay, or most of our parks today, they actually seem like free resources. And people don't concern about the implications that would happen if we interfere with them.
And the implications are quite high. Stanley, what is your opinion in regards to this?
Let me pick up on his last sentence. People treat the environment as an afterthought. And apart from human-wildlife conflict, the environment itself, tampering with the environment does aggravate human-wildlife conflict. And I'll illustrate this with, let me quote the words of a very senior politician in our country, who once said, when people are being told to leave the Mau forest, he said, the politician joked and said, kwani mvua inatoka mbinguni ama inatoka kwa miti. You know, such a statement of ignorance, but because of political expediency, you know, you don't want to lose votes from your voters who are encroaching on the forest. But we need to put politics aside. Take care of the environment at whatever cost.
At whatever cost.
Yes,
Indeed,
the people doing the illegal mining, sand harvesting, charcoal, whatever it is, we need to stop it.
Stop it. Steve Vitala, you have the last word on this.
I feel so sad that Nairobi National Park, being the first park to be gazetted in this country, is slowly being chipped off. 10 years ago, there was a debate, why do we have a national park in the capital city? And the thinking then was actually being promoted by the well-known investors in the city. I will not name names. And they say, why not just convert it into a real estate? And slowly, we are actually seeing that becoming real. Now, having said that, it's a pity that Kenyans are actually not aware that while you celebrate infrastructure projects on one hand, which is good, I've got nothing about infrastructure projects. It's development, it's good, it's going to move goods, it's going to get people to move from one locality to the other. But the destruction that is happening with the roads construction, first of all, the Southern Bypass alone, many Kenyans do not know how many trees had to be cut. Several of them had to. No wonder now we're experiencing delayed rains. On SGR alone, which now we're encroaching onto the area, it's also going to affect.
All right.
Now, Nairobi Park is among the lungs for the residents of Nairobi. If you allow Nairobi National Park to be degraded and even degazetted, I fear that that would happen, that actually you've got nothing for recreation and even for cleaning the air within Nairobi. So it's a sad thing that's happening. To me, I call it a double-edged sword. That Kenyans need to be aware that it's not only Nairobi National Park, but all protected areas across the country. Now, here's the challenge. While developers are giving us the economics of moving goods and services and everything, we need to talk about the value of our natural capital.
All right.
That's very important discussion that I would appreciate to come to Eburu next time and talk about the valuation of natural capital in Kenya.
Definitely.
Other countries that have done very well with conservation of flora and fauna have taken a key interest on valuation of natural capital. That Kenya can actually put natural capital, wildlife, the forest and everything as part of its assets.
All right.
In terms of Kenya's net worth.
In terms of Kenyan net worth. Thank you very much, Stevie Teller, Director of Operations, African Network for Animal Welfare, Stanley Prince Lawyer, as well as Jim Nyamu, Executive Director at Elephants Neighbors Center. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in this evening and, of course, sharing your experiences and, of course, being part of this discussion on the state of our wildlife in Kenya. And due to time constraints, of course, I've received quite a number of comments here. I will not be able to sample them. But the discussion does not end here. We still will be discussing this on our primetime bulletin, which will be coming right up your way in just a few minutes. My name is Zainab Ismail. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.
We are going to relocate